us after we said our good mornings. This morning we are holding a virtual voter town hall, and I just want to take a moment for us to just think about the severity of what's happening right now across the country. I think it is imperative for us to understand that we can't have a conversation about the importance of voting without talking about the importance of civil disobedience and unrest and why it is that we're doing that. So we know that voting is one of the many ways in which people everywhere, but I think particularly disenfranchised people and Black people can utilize their voices to really feel heard. At a time where we know that civil unrest happens because people don't feel heard, I can't think of a better time to have this conversation. So I ask that as we have this conversation today with some sister friends and of course with Reverend Jackson, that we move in the spirit of what makes the most sense in terms of a call to action or several calls to action, how we can mobilize as a people with our vote, but most importantly with our overall political power. So thank you so much for allowing me to moderate this morning. This is Rainbow Push Coalition's National Voter Town Hall.
Angela, do you hear me?
Yes, sir, I do.
Someone frozen.
I froze?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. I'm sorry, can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
She can't hear me here.
You can't hear me now?
She's trying to come through, but she's frozen.
Okay, Shelly, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a national voter town hall, elections in the era of coronavirus, and our call to action. And again, given everything that's going on right now, it's important for us to also recognize that through the crisis of George Floyd's tragic killing and murder, there's also coronavirus. And of course, Black people and people of color and poor people are disproportionately impacted by coronavirus. So today you will hear from some dynamic speakers to talk about what you can do in your own hometowns to make a difference with your vote and with your voice. At this point, I'm going to turn over the conversation to Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr., who of course is the founder and president of the Rainbow Push Coalition, who will kick us off and we'll get started. Thank you, Reverend.
Reverend is on mute. Brucey's.
I'm muting.
Hello?
Hi, Reverend.
You hear me now?
Yes, sir.
It's a joy to be with you today, Angela, to you and the panelists. We're facing a double pandemic of racism, pandemic of corona. And we will survive. We must will to survive to all of this. There's a pattern of this killing. It's Trayvon, it's Diallo, it's Michael Brown, it's Auburn, Georgia. There's a season of using Blacks as objects for releasing violence, and we must fight back, and we will fight back. We have a burden here, but with code blue and code 19. I said to young people in Minneapolis the other day, don't jump out of the protest and jump in the arms of Corona, because if you march without social distancing, this thing dwells and it dwells in congestion, it dwells in proximity, physical proximity. So you must in fact march with honor the codes, because we lost George the other day to code 4. Code 19 remains a devastating thing. So we must be careful. He must be fight.
Like we got frozen?
Yeah, I think we may have lost Reverend.
Todd, do you want to go ahead and pick up?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on with the conversation. First of all, good morning to everyone. I'm Todd Urey, Senior Vice President of Rainbow Push. I have the privilege of working with and for Reverend Jackson. As he was framing the conversation, we are having this discussion this morning because it's important as the methodology of systemic disruption is changing in real time. The pandemic has altered how we move and function. the processes by which we engage in direct and indirect political action has shifted because of it, but we still have to fully engage because the death, whether it's death by the pandemic, as Reverend pointed out, of COVID-19 or death by code blue, death is real and it is causing deep and lasting pain throughout our community. We are glad to have our sister and our leader, our political commentator, and our advocate, Sister Angela Rye, helping to facilitate this conversation. She is not just a lawyer, she is a relevant cultural critic that helps us frame the issues in a way that advances the survival not only of our people, but all people. Angela, we're glad to have you. I'm not going to extend it because I want you to lead us in this very important, critical, and timely conversation about how we're going to engage in the midst of a public health and a public policy pandemic. With that, Angela Rye, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yuri. I would say, one, I hate that we lost Reverend in the middle of what I know is going to be a resounding short sermonette, but I know he'll be back with us and he'll have a thunderous close. So we do know that. Again, I do want to ground this conversation with the lives lost. There are so many people of color who don't ever trend, who don't ever go viral because they don't have a hashtag, because there was no video or because there was no influencer speaking to the importance of righteousness and justice, which we know that Rainbow Push has been fighting for so long. So in the spirit and in honor of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Tony McDade, who people have not been talking about as much, who was killed by the police in Tallahassee, Florida. I want to start this off by just thanking the women, the queens who joined us this morning. You will each have a few minutes to give your open, and I would really like to make sure that we reserve the balance of our time to engage in not just a fruitful dialogue, because we're very good at having dialogue, very good at convening, but where we fall short sometimes as a people is in moving towards action. And so thankfully, all of the women here before you are great at giving us our marching orders, and I know that that's exactly what
Angela?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, again, I've had a little technical difficulty. I want to thank you and the panelists so very much for all that you do. And my point is, if we can put back on our shoulders, put us on this ticket, we must fight for fairness, fight for justice. The double pandemic of racism as well as Corona. We must fight both. They cannot march and ignore the disciplines of fighting Corona, even as we fight police brutality. But we must look beyond the pain. The census and voter registration, voter turnout come November. And you women have become the best in the world at this. I want to thank you, congratulate you. I want to bring on Brother Todd Yuri, who is our Senior Vice President and our Bureau Chief in Washington, who has been, since they've been this whole area. I want Todd to say hello to you guys and let you, sisters, go.
Yes,
Todd?
sir. I got it. We've gone. We've said good morning. Sisters, lead on. Let's go.
Thank you. And Reverend, yes, we did not drop the ball while you were not with us. So we got your back and we are going to keep pressing forward. So thank you so much. So ladies, with that, if you can each take a few minutes to share some important thoughts with us. We know that, again, that this conversation is a call to action. And our theme today is to alert, alarm, and ignite communities of color about the importance of the 2020 elections. You all are second to none at telling us exactly what we should be doing. So I'm going to turn it over first to Kristen Clarke, my good sister, the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law. And she's been saving our voting rights all over the country. So Kristen, thank you and good morning.
Good morning. It is so good to be here with everybody. Dr. King said, a riot is the language of the unheard. My heart is heavy thinking about the protests and the demonstrations that have been playing out from coast to coast. But I know that right next to the power of the protests is the power of our vote. And in 2020, the power of our vote and our voices matters now more than ever. I think about the police brutality, the police violence that we're contending with, and the pandemic, which has hit African Americans harder than any other community. This is a public health crisis that has, really impacted the country, but it's impacted Black folks in a particularly deep way. So we're dealing with pandemic on top of pandemic right now. And it's moments like this that I think for Black people that make clear why our votes matter. Because we're going to need officials at the table for us at every level who are fighting for us and fighting to help us get out of this deep, dark hole that we're in. We're going to need officials at the city level, the state level, the federal level that can help us figure out how do we get out of this economic crisis that's gripping the country? How do we deal with the systemic discrimination that infects our health care system? How do we deal with police brutality and police violence that has gone unchecked for far too long? Angela, I hear you on focusing on the work at hand, and so that's what I want to talk about. The pandemic has turned our voting system upside down. We have people who are hospitalized, who are quarantined at home, people who are dealing with sick family members, people who are dealing with folks who've died to the pandemic. So now more than ever, as Black people, we need to embrace vote by mail as a way of making sure our voices get heard in 2020. There are a couple of states that still have primary elections. There are about 8 states holding primary elections on Tuesday, and several states holding primaries throughout the month of June. Then we're going to get a chance to kind of catch our breath until November 3rd, 2020. Here's what we got to do right now. One, we got to make sure that our folks, everybody in our network, our family members, people we go to church with, people we go to school with, we got to make sure that folks are registered to vote. We know that purging of the voter rolls is a real thing, right? So even if you think you're registered, now is actually a critical time to make sure you are still indeed registered and active registered, and that you are on the rolls and able to exercise your voice in 2020. And here's the other thing. There are millions of people across the country who actually are not yet registered. We've got campuses shut down, churches shuttered, grassroots activists who can't do the door knocking, right? And normally those are ways that we organically bring unregistered Black folks onto the roll. So we've got a lot of work to do to fill in those gaps. The primary elections and general elections also require that we figure out, what do we do to exercise voice? How do you get your hands on an absentee ballot application? How do you get an absentee ballot cast successfully? And the rules vary state by state. Some states require that you get your ballot application notarized. There's some states that require that even when you put that absentee ballot in the envelope, that you sign the back of the envelope, that you put your address. And if you fail to do those things, they may not count your ballot. So we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we get this right. Here's the one thing that I want to ask everybody who's watching to do right now. I want you to pull out your phone and to plug in 866-OUR-VOTE, 866-OUR-VOTE. This is the number that anchors the Election Protection Coalition, a program that's been in place for 20 years strong. It is a nonpartisan voter protection program, and we work 365 days a year to answer all of those questions. How do you get registered? How do you vote absentee? What is the date for the primary election? So I want you to plug that number into your phone. I want you to send that out to everybody in your network. Now more than ever, we need to make sure that we have voice in every election happening this season.
Thank you, Kristen. And I do have some follow-up questions for you, but I will save them to when we get to questions. I now want to turn it over to another shero of mine. She talks about voting rights and justice and civil rights like an old school preacher. And that is Barbara Arwine, the founder and the president of Transformative Justice Coalition, for all the work that you've done while we watch, and for all the work you've done while we haven't seen. Barbara Arwine, we champion you. So thank you to Barbara Arwine.
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. And I want to just, say good morning to Reverend Jackson, to thank him again for leading the way yet again. Always, thank you for, risking your life and going to Minneapolis this week and speaking out for justice and compelling justice, along with the amazing grassroots organizations like Nyki Levy, Black Lives Matters Minneapolis, and all the great groups there. I want to thank you for that. We've been working in coalition, and Angela, you should know that Reverend Jackson, RPC, and the Transformative Justice Coalition works hand in glove. We've been working on what we call a voter justice initiative, and as part of that initiative, we've been doing a lot of the work that you're going to hear over and over from the rest of us today, working with the 90% reduction in voter registration all over the country. Because the DMVs are closed, and many of the states have been closed. The public service agencies, public assistance agencies, because religious institutions have been closed, because civic organizations haven't been able to do the kind of one-on-one rallies and other kinds of voter registration movements. What we have seen is this 90% reduction. So what do? Because we have 13 states that have no online voter registration as a state, meaning that they do not push it, they do not have it on their websites. So what we are trying to do is to regroup, to reset our clocks. And one of the things we're talking about now that we're seeing groups use that's working is
what's those 13?
Oh, I don't have the list in front of me, but good old Texas is one. They're notorious. In fact, their voter registration is flatlined. It's horrible. We've seen, I can, read that list for you, Reverend, if you want. I'll get it and pull it and read it at the end of the show.
Okay.
But there are 13. And the problem is that, we saw in Kentucky, for example, that where Mitch McConnell's running against Amy McGrath, that in February, they had 7,200 voter registrations. In March, they had 500, not even 10% of what they had in the past. We've seen this trend line all over the country. So it's very urgent that we think about new ways of voter registration. Online voter registration traditionally only accounts for 25% of all voter registration. So one of the things groups are doing that's very creative is they created what they call drive-up voter registration, where they have drive-up voter registration centers. That's something we ought to be thinking about all over the country. Other groups have been putting voter registration information into the grocery bags, at the pantries, at the long lines where you've seen hours of people having to wait to get a bag of food. What we've done to this country's economy is unbelievable. But that's another way of reaching out that we would not have been doing normally. So we got to be creative. We got to set up phone trees. Voter contact systems are critical right now. We should, every church, every synagogue, every mosque, every organization should be using phone trees to reach out to voters, just as we're reaching out to church members and other people saying, how are you? Are you okay? What about your voter registration? Are you registered? Have you checked your voter registration just to make sure you haven't been purged or you're not on the inactive list? Remember, 18 million people have been purged in the last 3 years. 8.7% of the voter registration in this country is on the inactive list. That's another 18 million people, 36 million people who have no clue as to whether or not they are properly registered. We have to reach out to them. We have to aggressively send out postcards to, to interact with those people. We have to be very clear that on the statewide level, with the RNC, saying that they're going to put 50,000 white vigilantes, former military, former cops, active off-duty cops, at our polls to intimidate and challenge Black and brown voters, that we need to have a state-by-state attack on that plan. There's a way of stopping it. I've stopped these plans before. And there's good ways of stopping them, but we have to do the work. So that requires, good organization by all of us to come together and to do a good job of confronting governors, confronting SBIs, all the other groups that can stop this, because there's no reason why we should allow white vigilantes to intimidate and threaten our voters who are already taking their lives into their hands voting in person. As to vote by mail, listen, everybody, vote by mail is wonderful for white people. Wherever it's used, white participation goes up significantly. In Wisconsin, it went up by 14%. Unbelievable. Fantastic turnout of progressive white voters. What happened in Milwaukee? Milwaukee, it went down by 30%. Voter participation among Blacks was down 30%. We're seeing this trend line in other states the application process. There's a big difference between the application participation rates for Blacks and whites in Pennsylvania. We're seeing what happened in Patterson, New Jersey. We're seeing these trend lines. Let's be very clear that what we got to have is what's called voter options. We got to have more than vote by mail. We got to also have drive-up voting. There's in those states that people talk about, Washington and Oregon, that people are so proud of because they do all vote by mail, they have drive-up voting also. They allow you to drive up and drop off your ballot right at the polling site, where they have the kangaroos. Those are people in big aprons who take your ballots. They're poll workers who collect the ballots. They have drive-up curbside voting. They have, other drive-through voting options. Give people these options. We also need Pennsylvania, because of the low application rate, has just yesterday instituted drop-off boxes. Maryland has that system. A lot of states do. It's a very effective way of people who don't trust the mail being able to actually see their ballot deposited. The other system that you got to have, of course, is expanded early voting, and you got to, because early voting is the best way for our people to know what's going on, and you got to have, some form of safe on-site voting. That means you got to get rid of the machines that can't be cleaned. And there are several of them that are in use that cannot be disinfected between voters. That means that you got to make sure that every voter has PPE, not just the poll workers, but no voter should be in there should be standing in line without a mask and gloves. We got to walk those lines and make sure people have the proper PPE. We got to make sure that all the poll workers are protected. These are just things that are new that we got to do in this era. And we just have to unite. On Monday, I hope people will watch our program that we're doing at 7:00 p.m. And this is our Teletown Hall. You can see the flyer. We won't be silent. Register and vote 2020. And the magnificent Congresswoman Maxine Waters is opening up this program for us. And what we're saying to people is that if you're angry about what we're watching, the decimation of African-American lives by rogue white vigilantes, as we saw with Ahmaud Arbery, if you're angry about these police killings, then what we're saying is, remember, you got power in your vote, that your vote is powerful because you can elect your district attorney and your chief prosecutor, your state's attorneys. If they're no good, get rid of them. If you want better people, make them run for office, encourage them. We've got to turn it around, because the worst crime is not just the killing. It is when we allow these people to walk free and to walk away as if nothing happened. So that we have power over. We can elect the judges, these judges that make horrible decisions. They ought not to be on the bench. We should have great progressive judges. We should be electing the right sheriffs. When you're talking about why is it that people are in jail and they can't vote even though they haven't been convicted of anything, the sheriff controls all of those voter registration options. There's so much that we can do. Angela, you know, I just wanted to get started. I just wanted to, you know, remind us that from the days immortal of our people, of our people's presence, where we work from sun, you know, can't see in the morning to can't see in the evening, as Harriet, you know, fought to free us, as so many people, we have always made a way where there's no way. We have always done the possible where everybody told us it was impossible. Because we are a people of strong moral conviction, a people of strong faith, and we walk in a divine way, and we can do this in this era, but we got to unite to do it. I want to thank you. I'm not going to, you know, later on we can pull up some of the other slides, but I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you so much, Barbara, our counselor and our fighter. Thank you for all that you do. Again, when we're watching and when we don't see the work, we're so grateful for you being our chief voting rights advocate. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jessica Barker of Affluent Business Management. She is a wife, a mother of 4, and a social justice advocate. She's the coordinator for Lift Our Vote 2020, a national campaign that is aimed at combating voter suppression through awareness, education, and collaboration among civic leaders and the public. Jessica?
Hello, good morning, everyone. It is such an honor first. So thank you so much to Rainbow Push Coalition and Reverend Jackson for all the work that you all have done. Thank you, Miss Angela, for sitting here and moderating. So I just want to say thank you to Miss Barbara as well, one of my mentors and women that I look up to, who is making sure that we stay connected and aware. I thank you so much. Currently, as Angela said, I am leading Vision Movement, which Vision Movement is, we're a collaborative of business owners and entrepreneurs, legislative leaders, organizations, nonprofits, just visionaries. And we understand that using our gifts and our talents is how we can create change and see change in our political and electoral system. And I'm so excited because we use this platform to connect history and what happened through the civil rights movement all the way up to what is currently happening, like what happened in 2013 with the Shelby versus Holder decision, which happened here in Shelby County, Alabama. I am born and raised in Alabama. So the civil rights story and suppression and oppression always finds its roots here in the South. And Alabama has a dirty history of having played a hand in making sure that the people here and across the nation are oppressed. We do know the Shelby Holder decision ended up becoming a federal case in which it stripped the preclearances in the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which gave us the protection and the coverages under which we could vote and access the ballot box without restrictions. And once they overturned that decision on June 25th, 2013, all of this that we are seeing now, it was all planned. And once that decision was overturned, where we are right now with voting, the suppression tactics that we are seeing, and in the midst of a pandemic on top of what they already were doing, we are seeing people are afraid now for their lives to go and vote. So voting literally now has become a matter of vote or die. And we are fighting as advocates on the ground to make sure we keep our people empowered and engaged and ready to lift their vote when 2020 November comes up and it's time for us to go out and vote. So I'm just excited to be able to be a voice right now that encourages and empowers my community.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm now going to go to Nykidra Robinson, who is the president and founder of Black Girls Vote.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. And to the Reverend, thank you so much for just your sacrifice. I remember we're just growing up listening to you and being inspired by you. So to be here on a panel with you is such an honor and it's so humbling. And thank you to my sisters who are here in the struggle and in the fight, because they believe in the power of the vote. And so for me, as we sit here today, and so many of our hearts are heavy because we see what's happening across the country. And over the last few days, we've been in mourning and sad to see our brothers, our fathers, our sons being killed just for being Black, and just to see George Floyd in the city of Minnesota. That hurts, and that's a different kind of pain that we're carrying. And for me, Black Girls Vote, we were founded in 2015. And one of the reasons I started it because of the murder of Freddie Gray. And so just to see 5 years later what's happening in our communities, and just to see us being tired. I know Kristen started with a quote, and I speak to the great Fannie Lou Hamer, when we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And as Black people, we're tired. We're absolutely exhausted. And so as we've said on this panel, what do we do? In an effort to alert people, we know that we have to meet the people where they are. And so while for us, a lot of us are we're into voting, we're passionate about voting, but we know there's a community out there who doesn't give a daggone about voting. What they are concerned about, they're concerned about their family members dying. They're concerned about putting food on the table and how they're going to survive. So how do we meet them where they are, and how do we engage them in this election, which is, we hear every election is the most critical election of our lifetimes. And so we have to do innovative things. We have to be creative in our efforts to get them out to vote. And I can speak to the work that we're doing. Again, we were founded in Baltimore. We're doing work in Maryland. And we came up with a campaign where we're sending customized kits to Baltimoreans. And this kit, and we're calling it Party in the Mailbox. And it's kind of hard to sit here and say, let's party in the midst of what's happening in our country. But it's information in the kit. It has information about voting. It has information about your polling locations. It has information, snacks, right? And it's a way that we are engaging our voters in Baltimore. This is something we're planning to take nationally. And for me, particularly, I'm committed to Black women and young Black women. And that's what Black Girls Vote is founded on, because we know that a lot of the movements in our country started from the young. And those people, those are the ones who are fearless. They have a different kind of fearlessness. They're not concerned about losing their jobs or their corporate jobs. They're concerned about if they're going to live and if they're going to survive. And just to see the videos that we're seeing across social media of just the young people crying out for help, it's our job and it's our duty to serve them. So when we talk about alert, when we talk about alarm, let's talk about what's at stake. When we talk about from the voting down a ballot, those DAs. I'm proud that I'm in the city of Baltimore, where we have a Marilyn Mosby, who's a dear friend, who wasn't afraid to stand up to the officers and say that I'm going to convict you, or I'm going to, it was hard to get a charge. She was unable to charge them, but she was fearless and she was unafraid. So shout out to my sister, Marilyn Mosby. But then we have to talk about all the other individuals who are on a ballot. Let's talk about that and alarm them at what's at stake. Let's also focus on, when we talk about the judicial system, we know right now that Mitch McConnell is making so many appointments to the judicial system right now. We have to talk about the Supreme Court going into 2020. We have to let these individuals know that these Supreme Court justices that we have at stake in 2020 are critical, not only for our generation, but generations to come. So again, meeting the people where they are, and then ignite is to get out to vote. And again, we have our ways that we're doing things, but it's about the collaboration, and just to see the sisters here on this call who are committed. So I am excited about working with so many of you, not only in my city, or my state, which is Maryland and Baltimore, but across the country, because we know there are some critical states that are at that will determine the election of 2020. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there, because there's so many things I can say, but I want to be respectful of the time, and just thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyki. I'm going to pause here really quick just to make sure the audience is aware that we are taking your questions. The questions will be asked when the panelists conclude their remarks. We only have 2 left, and they are, they inspire me every single day with the work they do. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my dear sister and my leader, LaTosha Brown, over Black Voters Matter. She's the co-founder. She is also a philanthropist and a philanthropic consultant and a political strategist. One of the baddest women out here, LaTosha Brown.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. I just wanted to start and center that my spirit is grieving. even now I'm fighting, holding back tears, because we're in a real moment. We're in a real moment, and while most of my life has been dedicated to voting, you know, the truth of the matter is, this morning when I got up and I was praying and I was saying, you know, come Holy Spirit and just revive our spirits, revive us. That ultimately, y'all, we grieving. We are collectively, our spirit is grieving. Our family, this isn't about another activity in this system. This is really around us using every tool that is available to give our people some relief. And so I just want to offer and raise it in the context that when we're even talking about voting, right? I'm not one of the people that, even though my life's work has been dedicated to voting, and say that's the end all and the be all, but it is a tool. It is a tool for us to demonstrate our agency, and it is a tool for us to really be able to get some representation and get some harm reduction, some relief for our people. Some folks got to be accountable for what's happening, right? This ain't the moment for us to philosophize and just send things on Facebook and Twitter and act like it's okay. It's not okay, right? And so I raise that because I want, you know, Angela and Reverend Jackson, you know, I'm so honored by the work. I'm from Alabama. I'm actually a native of Selma. And I'm so inspired by the work and the foundation that you and others have laid. And, you know, oftentimes just want folks to know that we continuing to work. And then the generation behind us are continuing to work. And then that generation. And so there's a couple of things that I just want to share. And I'm with Black Voters Matter. We're in 11 states, most of them in the South. We're working with grassroots. Our goal is to work to empower grassroots Black-led organizations on the ground that are doing work. Many of the organizations that we're working with now are supporting COVID-19. They're on the front lines of doing mutual aid work. And so I just want, in the midst of, we've lost a lot of folks. In these 2 weeks alone, I've lost 2 people that are important in my life. Like, I just don't want to, I don't want to step over that. This is literally, we're at this confluence of our political reality in this country, the economics, all of this, the health crisis that we're in our country. This ain't the time for us to have opinions and not act and not move and not do some work. And so I'm a couple of things I just kind of want to raise in terms of what I think are, in my mind, are some pieces that we need to do. So one, every single person needs to have a political home. If you are watching this, you need to join an organization and be a part of an organization where we are organized, we are stronger. When there is collective will and a collective power, we are more impactful. You need a political home, whether that's organizing and joining Rainbow Push Coalition, whether that's joining one of our organizations, but you need a political home. Even if, and I know a lot of folks will say, well, I'm not an activist. You don't have to be an activist to be activated. At this moment, you should be activated, right? If you ain't doing no work, be quiet and sit down. Don't talk about them kids out in the street. Shut up. At this moment, even the scripture says, prayer without works are dead. Activate your faith. If you really are a person of faith in this moment, you are being called to activate your faith. Our people are at war right now. We can make this seem like it's just another piece, but we are at war right now. And so it's really important that those of us that really claim that we have a spiritual belief, that we're grounded in that, and that our faith and our works line up with our word. And so in that, I just want to offer that I think it's important that you join the political home. The second thing is write some checks. There are bail funds right now for brothers and sisters in Minnesota and throughout the country, in Atlanta and other places. Write a check. We give folks who kill us. We give people who don't give a darn about us, the Targets of the world and the CVSs of the world, we give them our money. Yet folks who are standing in a space of justice right now, they need our resources. Just like we can give Nike $100 for some shoes or $20 for a t-shirt. The point is right now, we've got to step up, y'all. We got to step up, family. Write a check. You can come to our page. You can go to Rainbow Push. There are many organizations that are even on this call, that are on this town hall right now that you can write a check. Write a check. The third thing that I'm going to ask is that you actually decide at this moment that it's not just about you voting. Many of the people that are watching this, I'm sure that we already preaching to the choir, that I'm quite sure that you're going to vote. The question is, at this point, you got to multiply your vote by 10. You got to be responsible, personally responsible for at least 10 people, whether that's your family or your friends, that you check in, y'all. It's organized. It's organized. Everybody don't organize in the street. Everybody not gonna organize large masses, but you can organize 10 people. We organize folks for our family dinners and family reunions. Organize at least 10 people. The fourth thing that I'm gonna ask us to do is that to really get grounded, like spiritually grounded. We talk about, our religious practices, but who we are as a people. We have always been a people that it has been our literally standing in this space around our spiritual morality, around our humanity that has really shaped and changed the whole world. This is the moment for us to really go deep into that our people are suffering and grieving. They're waiting for us to show up in a particular kind of way. And so it's really important for us to get spiritually grounded in this moment, right? That you put your faith to work in action, that you are literally speaking life into the folks. And I'm saying this because oftentimes it is frustrating and it's hurtful that there are kids that are young folks and people who are literally sacrificing, and some that you may not agree with what they're doing, but they're trying to tell you that they're hurting. So instead of let's tearing those folks down, let's speak life into them and empower them and start literally connecting them to the work. And then the fourth and the final thing, that, I don't even know what number it is at this point of what I'm saying, but it's movement building time. Like it's movement building time. We have also we're gonna have to be honest, how we've gotten distracted in this capitalist system, and that part of what is happening right now, y'all, we are complicit, right? We are complicit. We are allowing the same circumstance to happen to our people without demanding something different. So this is an election that is coming up, right? That we've got to get engaged, we got to vote, but we really got to activate differently. And in that, what that also means is folks that say, well, Black folks need agenda. There are Black folks that have been working on an agenda. Just because you ain't been working on one, don't mean that ain't Black folks ain't been working on one. And I can point you to some. One, if you go to Black Futures Lab, they've been working on an agenda. Go click on that. Read, write, and reflect in this moment. You should be doing those things. You should be reading, right? And I mean beyond Twitter and Facebook, because they already told you who they are, right? But ultimately read from your people. And so ultimately one of the things that you can do is literally there's an agenda that Black Future Labs, the Movement for Black Lives has an amazing agenda that they worked on in the process. There are Black organizations, that's what I'm saying, get connected. And this is the moment, this ain't the moment for us to have platitudes and to talk over like we just don't keep moving like it's normal, because it's not normal. Right now, COVID-19 is devastating our community. My aunt called me yesterday, is sick, that is afraid to go to the hospital in Alabama because she said to me, my 86-year-old aunt said to me, she knows that if she go to the hospital, they might not treat her the way that they're gonna treat the white folks. So ultimately, she has a better chance, she feels, at staying at home. This is in 2020, and we're paying taxes, and we're supporting these businesses that don't support our folks, and we're sitting there crying about a Target when our folks, if you're more mad, if you're more angry about a Target being burned down than the life being lost, then there's something fundamentally wrong, y'all. So in this mess, I'll just say that this is a moment that I don't think that this is just about calling forth that we all being exposed. The white folks being exposed, America being exposed, we're being exposed. Who are you with? And where are you going to stand? Where is your faith going to be grounded? And do you believe that you can transform this country? Because I do. I believe that in the moment when we decide that we're going to transform America, it is going to change. But ultimately, we've got to make that decision. And so as you're doing your work and as we're talking about voting, we've got to be real that we're lining this up with not just a one-time event, as if this one-time event is going to change everything, because we've been voting. Right? But we've got to vote, and we've got to strategically vote in higher numbers. We got to bring our families to vote. We got to put power behind that vote. We've got to protest. We got to raise all kind of head, whatever we need to do. We need to sing, shut down, whatever we need to do. At the end of the day, we are tired. And our folks are saying that we are tired. And even God gives a duck enough sense to take care of his ducklings. So in this space, our community is being attacked. We're under siege. The question is, what will you do to relieve the pain.
My God. I told y'all. That is LaTosha Brown. Yes, yes.
Amen.
Oh, I thought you were saying Angela. You were saying amen. That amen is not for me. Praise the Lord. Okay. LaTosha Brown, my God, talking about framing the conversation and setting it up perfectly for my dear sister, Tiffany Loftin, who is the NAACP Director of the Youth and College Division, and also is doing the work when we're looking and when we're not. So Tiffany, with that, the floor is yours, and we will open it up to audience questions. Oh, Tiffany, one little housekeeping note. Folks who are watching on YouTube and on the various Facebook channels, speaking of Facebook, LaTosha, can send their questions to questions@rainbowpush.org. Tiffany, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, I could sit here all day and listen to Sister LaTosha sing. I think that I wasn't emotional on this entire panel until then, because I'm reminded about how healing music is and how healing singing is and how all of the organizing work that we've been doing, all of the protest work, all of the activists and uprisings that are taking place across the country use art as a form of healing and protection and upliftment and strength. So Sister LaTosha, thank you for the strength this morning. I am sending love and light and strength to all of my people. We are all in the middle of this conversation talking about elections, and there are so many people who are suffering mentally, spiritually, emotionally in this moment. I'm currently on day 80, and I know people have told me not to count how many days I've been in quarantine, but I am one of those folks who live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. I have a mother who was unemployed since the pandemic started, and there are 60 million people across the country who are unemployed. My mother has a brain aneurysm and has been scared to go back and forth to the hospital for her checkups so that she is able to stay safe. I have lost family members and friends to COVID-19. My staff team has been trying to work during this moment, and they have lost family and friends to COVID-19. They also have family and brothers who are incarcerated, who are also dealing with the pandemic while they are behind bars. I have a friend who took his own life, who left his babies behind because this moment is too heavy. So I don't come to this conversation with the traditional NAACP list of things you should do about voting, because I'm honoring how we all might be feeling in this moment. And I'm honoring the thousands of students and young Black activists that I have the responsibility of working with every single day, who are not only trying to encourage their communities to participate in elections, but also help give them answers and guide them in this moment of uprising. It's not unfamiliar to us. We saw this in 2014. The whole country was on fire in 2014 after the murder of Michael Brown. And I woke up on Thursday morning and went to sleep Thursday night looking at my Instagram and looking at the news, reminded about how strong and how fearless our people are across the country. The responsibility that we have right now is multifaceted. My mentor, Cortland Cox of SNCC, says all the time that voting is necessary, but it is not sufficient. And in this moment, voting is necessary. I know that we've been having debates. I know that we've been having conversations about just the presidential position, but there are so many races, so many decisions, so many policies that impact people who look like me every single day. And this year, like every year, like my sister Nyki said, is necessary for us to turn out to make sure we're participating. The attacks that we have heard about from my sisters who do this work every single day on voting rights and on voter suppression are real. And now more so than ever during COVID-19, the attacks are going to be magnified. The NAACP back in April of this year partnered with the Center for American Progress to write a report on a list of recommendations to a roadmap, because my job is to make sure that people have the tools, the ideas, and are connected across the country to move their states to take action. You can find that report in the chat that I'm about to post right now, because I do not feel like reading the entire thing to y'all. But the report is there and it has recommendations of things that you can do in your community. I get people in my DMs every hour asking, Tiffany, what is it that I can do? Social justice is not a competition. You do not need to have 1 billion followers. You do not need to be on the news. You don't need to be at the press conference to make action work in your community. You can do simple things. And so one of the tools that I'm giving you is in the chat right now, and it allows you to see the different recommendations of things that Black people specifically need right now in this moment to make sure that the vote is accessible to every single person that looks like us in this community, especially during the pandemic, because we are facing new fights. The second thing is simple. I'm going to lead by example because I have my voter guide right here. I've already highlighted things that I'm going to vote for when I go to my polling location on Tuesday, because June 2nd is the day that DC votes. I've been using vote.org to stay updated because during this time, deadlines have changed. There were 13 states who moved their elections because of the pandemic. And so there were folks who were confused about when the voter registration deadline was, when the absentee deadline was. Vote.org and NAACP have a national partnership. And the young people across the country have been using this tool to ask folks to do one of two things: either register to vote, which is what we're asking folks to do, or 2, check your status. We've heard about the purging. We've heard about the deadlines that have been changed, et cetera. If you check your status, you'll find out sometimes that your polling location might have closed. You'll find out sometimes, like I just found out, my last name starts with an L. There's a certain time that I have to go to the polling place because they're trying to keep up with social distancing measures, physical distancing measures. So they want folks between the letters of A and M to come from 8 to 11, and they want the folks from after the M to Z to come from 11 to 3. And so you need to know that information before you show up and make that effort. Vote.org will give 2 things to you. It'll allow you to register and check your status, but then you can also make sure that you file for your, request your mail-in ballot. You can make sure that you register for your absentee. You'll get reminders. It has sent me reminders in my text message and my email to find out when I can go and when I can't go. And then it also made sure that I got my voter guide. Listen, it's not just about going to vote again for the presidency. I need folks to be educated when they walk into the ballot box. And that requires you to sit down and, like my sister LaTosha said, read. Not just social media, not just how somebody feels about a certain candidate, but it requires you to read to make sure that you know what's going on. I found out that everybody in my election, 1 is uncontested and 2 ain't got a platform and agenda. So I took the liberty, because I'm at home, to tweet and Instagram these folks personally and say, yo, what is your agenda around housing and affordability in the city of DC? What is your stance on safety for Black people in the community? How are you going to reopen the community after COVID-19? And so young Black leaders across the country can do that on their cell phone, their iPad, or their computer. And since we're in the House, we need to make everything easy for people. Vote.org is super easy. The other thing is this: I go to Alfred Street Baptist Church. I'm a proud member there. My pastor, Pastor Howard John Wesley, and I just got finished doing a really incredible conversation on Wednesday about elections and the criminalization and violence against Black people right now in this moment. And he pledged on that phone call, or excuse me, on that live, that every single Alfred Street member was going to get registered to vote. And we have 9,000 members of Alfred Street Baptist Church. I charge and move every single person who's a part of a political organization, a faith space, a Greek organization, a campus, a community, a school, a workplace, to make sure that your job as an organizer and as a leader, as an activist, is to touch the people that you are in contact with every single day. You don't need to find the folks in Minneapolis if you live in South Florida. You don't need to work on the California LA riot if you live in New York City. You can do exactly what you need to do in your own city and in your own backyard. And if you don't know who your DA is, your chief of police is, if you don't know who your school board is, if you don't know who your city council members are and your chairman is, if you don't know what their responsibilities are, I am charging you all to join us. Second link. We are hosting a Black Civic Summer. There are going to be 5 classes that the NAACP Youth in College is hosting. It starts on June 9th. Space is limited. It's only 300 people. So I'm giving y'all access to it now, but it technically doesn't open until Monday. And we are asking for, pre-VIP registration for the class. And we're asking y'all to join us because this course, it's not a Zoom training. It's not a PowerPoint webinar. It is a class. We are inviting my sister Marilyn Mosby, my sister Kim Fox, my brother Bruce Franks, folks who have been doing the work on the ground to come and train people in real life and then give them practical examples. And then in the class, you're also going to practice how to do it. We're going to focus on the election, the vote, the census, Black people versus the police, and Black people in the Black agenda. And I encourage you all to join us for those 5 classes that start on June 9th. The last thing I want to say is, I want to shout out Angela Jackson, who is the president of the VIP entry, the president of the Fresno NAACP campus chapter. And she's one of my incredible young leaders across the country. We got a billion of them. And she organized last year for months on end, because sometimes we don't see these things in a microwave answer. She organized for months on end to get a bill passed. The bill is called the Student Civic and Voter Empowerment Act. It passed and was signed into law in October 2019. So this is just a couple months ago. The bill allows for the University of California school system and some community colleges to mandate that they increase the opportunity for students to register to vote and have access to contacting and working with their students across the campuses. That means that if you were part of the NAACP, the student government, or the Black Student Union, you get the access to work with the school to contact every single student on your campus. That makes your life as an organizer easier, because you don't have to wait to table for people to come to you. You can straight get to them, and you get to do the work of organizing those folks and building out your organizations with new leaders and folks in this moment who are looking for something to do and looking for an opportunity to make a difference. I posted the link so that you can see what the act is and how they did it. If you're interested in either the school, the act that California did, because other states are considering that as well. We had a training that we did yesterday morning with Jael Kanindra, who is the president of the Minnesota Student Association. I know Angela spoke to her right before we did, and we had an opportunity to have her train 67 schools on what they did to write that letter. This morning, 7 schools replicated the letter and the petition, and she is working with us directly with the toolkit that we have to make sure that students across the country, not just colleges and universities, but high schools and middle schools, also have the opportunity to end police terror at their schools. We are not a one-sided monolithic diaspora of people. There are multiple ways to get involved. Registering to vote is the bare minimum. So I'm asking you all to please check out those links, join our chorus, check out the bill that California passed, ask me for the toolkit, we can send it to you. We're really looking for folks who right now in this moment have not been involved. We're welcoming you with open arms, because you can sit at the table with us to help strategize, plot, and organize. And I really look forward to the discussion that this powerful group of people are going to have. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. What I love about Tiff is she is my younger sister, but still one of my leaders. And I just have to say this, Jael Kanindra from the University of Minnesota is the first Black person, first woman president of the Student Government Association, and took on the entire Minneapolis Police Department, telling them they have no place on her campus. And she got her Student Government Association, which is very diverse. Again, she's the first Black, and she was the first Black vice president too, to sign on to that. And they gave the University of Minnesota 24 hours to respond. They responded in less than 24 hours, ended the contract with the police department. And that's exactly the type of action we need right now. So Tiff, I'm so glad that you not only lifted up her work, but you made it spread. And that is really what this is about. So I want to get right into, I know we have audience questions that will be coming, but in addition to that, I want to go back to Kristen. You talked about the importance of using 866 Our Vote, which we know is the election protection hotline. Can you please explain to the audience? I imagine that most of the people that tuned in early for this town hall may know, but just a brief explainer for those who may not. What is election protection, and what are the other purposes of that number?
Yeah, so the election protection hotline is a nonpartisan voter protection program. It is available 365 days a year. Tiffany, everybody's been talking about how the landscape has changed in 2020. It really depends on what state you're in, finding out, what are the rules for vote by mail? What are the early voting opportunities? When is your primary election happening? Where's your polling place located? Are you registered? Are you still registered? For all of these questions and more, you can call 866 Our Vote. It is the nation's largest and longest running voter protection program, anchored at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. It is the heart of the work that we do, making sure that everyone has voice in our democracy, most especially African Americans, who too often are targeted by voter suppression tactics. This season in 2020, we're dealing with a pandemic that has upended our elections. And then we're dealing with all of the pre-existing voter suppression efforts that were going on before the pandemic. Let me just give you an example of what we're up against. We're up against groups like Judicial Watch and True the Vote, dark, nefarious groups that are incredibly well-funded, that are right now quietly filing lawsuits to purge the voter registration rolls, to limit access to absentee voting. And what we do at 866 Our Vote is we troubleshoot all of those problems and issues that Black people, that Americans all over the country are contending with. I just want to give you one example, Angela, of kind of some of the ugliest voter suppression schemes that we're seeing in 2020, because right now we are engaged in a lot of litigation at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law to beat back these schemes. Kentucky, the state of Kentucky had the gall in the middle of the pandemic to put in place a strict photo ID law. At a time when DMV offices are closed and shut down, anywhere that you can go in the state to get an ID, it is literally shut down. And lawmakers thought this was the right time to put an ID law on the books. We are suing the state of Kentucky over this. Tennessee is a state where officials have said fear of the pandemic is not an excuse. That is not a legitimate excuse to get an absentee ballot. And on top of that, Tennessee is also a state that imposes criminal penalties on groups that distribute absentee ballot applications. I'm going to say it again. Tennessee is a state that literally imposes criminal penalties on groups that distribute absentee ballot applications. This is where we are in 2020. It's ugly out there. And so right now we are in court every day fighting some of these ugly voter suppression efforts. But the picture is not so dark everywhere. There are actually some states out there that are doing the right thing, like New York and California, that are making it easier for people to get absentee ballot applications. The takeaway is that it really just depends on what state you're in to understand what the current state of play is. So you've got some great resources that many people have talked about. 866 Our Vote, tweet it out, put it in your church bulletin, send an email to everybody in your family. We have to work night and day, every day between now and November 3rd, 2020, to make sure that all of us are registered to vote, and to make sure that we all know what the rules are, what the dates are, where our polling places in our respective states, so that every one of us can have voice in our democracy, and so that collectively we can shape the future direction of this country at this really dark time.
Thank you, Kristen. One of the things that I want to point out, you brought up Tennessee. What is important for the viewing audience to know is, again, the Shelby versus Holder decision that was already referenced in this conversation is the reason why it makes Kristen's work all the more difficult, because states that would have been required to get pre-clearance from the Department of Justice no longer have that responsibility. That was gutted from that Supreme Court decision. And I think, once again, an important reason for why we must vote, especially to protect our own interests. I want to now turn to Barbara Arwine. We talked about the 13 states who don't have online registration. I have my interns pull just in case. You have them too?
I do.
Okay, perfect. So if you can touch on that. I know we talked about phone trees, drive up voter registration. What are the other things we can't do? 90% reduction in voter registration is astounding to me, and I had no idea. So please talk to us about the 13 states where you cannot register online, and what else we must do.
Well, there's, it's fascinating because of those states. You have Arkansas, you got Maine, you got Mississippi, you got Montana, you got New Hampshire. Fortunately, Oklahoma just came online recently. New Jersey just came online recently. So those are good, changes. North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, Wyoming. So you heard some big states where Black folks are. Huge states: Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas. I mean, we got to be worried about, that all that flatlining of voter registration. And it is a national problem. It's not just, in those states, it's all over the country because the Department of Motor Vehicles has been closed. And remember that most states that allow you to same day register and vote, you do that at the polls doing early voting. And if you have your polls closed, it's hard for people to figure out how to do it otherwise. So it's been a real mess. And, and I'm very proud of the groups that are being creative and are out there, creating these drive-up voter centers, getting out there and working with the food pantries and the other, places where people have to go. Where people need to get information. I want to just really double down on everything that has been said by Kristen, by Tiffany, by LaTosha. They're best friends during this time. Not only is 866 our vote, which I had the pleasure of creating when I was at the Lawyers Committee, along with the amazing judge, now Judge Anita Earls, but also your other best friends got to be vote.org. We are in fact a partner with vote.org. But one of the things I want everybody to know that vote.org does that we haven't talked about is that there are 13 to 17 million people in this country who are formerly incarcerated. And they are in states where they are in fact eligible to vote. But because they've seen the incredible evilness of the state of Texas and prosecuting Crystal Mason, who made a mistake, that she didn't realize that in her state, that if you're still under supervision of the court, that the system, that you cannot register and vote. And she did, and they have convicted her and sentenced her to 5 years, and we're all fighting that. But because of that, people around the country think it means it applies in their own state. And they're not aware that in Illinois, they're not aware in all these other states that they have the right, like Maryland, that they have the right to register and vote. So we got 13 to 17 million confused voters. And one good thing that you can find out is that vote.org has teamed up with the Campaign Legal Center and created an online tool that you can go into. I've used it to, just find out, what your status is, what your state allows. Please, people, 13 to 17 million. We got to reach out. We got to help people. We got to, I run into it all the time. People tell me, no, I can't vote. And of course, when we talk with them, it turns out they can. It is so important that we use that tool, vote.org. You can check your voter registration status in 2 minutes. You can register to vote 5 to 8 minutes maximum. It is really an amazing tool. The other tool that's brand new that came online last year is Map the Vote. Map the Vote. People, if you can't afford Catalyst, the van, whatever, you can use Map the Vote, and it's going to tell you who on your block is registered and who's not. It's going to tell you who in your neighborhood is registered and who's not. It's going to help you when you're talking to folks who tell you, I'm good, to know that they're not good, that they're not actually registered. So Map the Vote is another amazing tool. And I've been looking at it a lot. So I think that, these are just some of the other things that we need to do. If you could share for a minute, my slides, number 5 and 6, pages 5 and 6. I don't know if Rose is there, but I just want to make sure that, we give this information to people about the voter options. Here's some issues about, vote by mail, about how you make it work for Black people. These are the things you got to do if you want it to work for Black people. You got to have all of these options. I just helped a Black woman, I'm working with her still in Maryland, who is dutifully registered. We established that. She's got the right address, but she has no mail-in ballot. that should have been sent to her. These are some of the things that we can do to address some of the problems that people are seeing. Next slide, quickly, the second one. These are the other options that I talked about you gotta have these options for voting. These are, the things that people don't think about. We think about the PPE for the poll workers, like I said, but we don't think about the disinfecting the machines. If you can't disinfect the machines, you gotta have paper ballots. If you got paper ballots, you gotta allow people to take the pen that they use home with them, or you gotta discard it. You gotta have, this kind of level of, of awareness that in this time, that's how much voting has changed. And we have to help people. And think about this, in Pennsylvania, they're getting ready to go to polls on, they're getting ready to go to the polls. There are 8 million registered voters in Pennsylvania. Only 1.9 have requested an application for a mail-in ballot. That's the application. And we know the problems that I just talked about for the lady in Maryland about actually receiving it and getting it, mailed on time. But we also know that in Philadelphia, they reduced the number of polling sites from 880 to 180. Can you imagine? 6 million voters who, if they're gonna turn out even at 50%, that's over 1 million plus voters who are gonna be scrambling on Tuesday to find a polling place, because if you had 880 and you now only have 180, that's the situation. So what we have to do is to really work on calling people to make sure they know where their polling places are, to do outreach, to all those voters, because the states aren't doing it the way they should, and that we should do, this kind of aggressive, voter assistance. And the good news is that we can call people. It's not that hard. We can write people. We can text people. We got to, really create more organization than ever. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And what I want to do now, y'all, we have 15 minutes left, and I do not want to engage in audience suppression as we talk about voter suppression. And so what I want to ensure I do is get some of these questions out to each of you. I'm going to just run through some of them. Y'all can pick them. I'm going to ask for what we do on my podcast. It's called a rapid round. I'm going to ask for you to do a rapid round because I want to go to LaTosha and Tiff to close us out. So if we could just quickly do that. And of course, we know that Reverend has the final closing. I will go here. So where are the most strategic places to invest in 2020 to align the federal agenda with our needs? Somebody said, as a Black woman, how and what do I need to do other than just vote for VP Biden? Someone else said, what is the voting strategy? Because vote blue no matter who is not it. Somebody else said, what is our plan about pooling our resources to build a community that we control? In 1920, $1 stayed in the community for 100 days before it left. Today it's 6 hours. You do the math. LaTosha, I'm nominating you to answer that question and close us out in song. If you hear this, please, thanks. It says, is it possible fall or summer? It's too many. I don't understand that question. Yes. So, yes, sir.
May I make an observation?
Sure.
First, I don't forget this. Thanks. Shelly Davis put us together. Please give Shelly Davis a big hand, please. Right. Secondly, I heard Tiffany, you were very inspiring this morning. You kept emphasizing many people in the seniors in churches can't read. And I remember personally, my grandmother was not going to vote for me. She loved me. She couldn't read, she couldn't write. She had to make an X. She was Ms. Burns. She was just Jackson grandma. She didn't want to go downtown, and my mother would take her down and take her to vote. Every senior, every person can have someone in the booth with them. I never go in by myself anymore. I might get confused on so many down ballot people to vote for. You can take someone in the booth with you. You can take someone in the booth. You should not have to go alone. and that should give some people assurance. Second thing is that I keep hearing you saying about you're tired. Y'all too young to be tired. Be determined. That's an old phrase, tired. You get into a football uniform, I'm tired, I got to do another game. You know you're going to get tackled. Determined to win. We're determined to win. And the fact is we're winning. I had a session last Saturday, and with Black mayors, Mayor of Selma, Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile, former Montgomery, where the Confederates were, Richmond, Confederates were, Mayor of Houston, Dallas. I mean, we're winning. We're winning bottom up. Don't let anybody break our spirit. The other thing, it seemed to me, is that high school students, age 18, are eligible to register and vote. Vote for what? Vote for Pell Grants. Vote for what? Vote for a job when you get through college. All the college students need a reason to vote, and don't just vote for your guy, Biden, or your guy, whomever it may be. Vote for yourself. Our last point is, I think the jury is an act of militance. Make it put some zing in it. When Emmett Till was killed, the killer was free for 40 years. They knew who killed him, and they almost bragged about it in the courtroom. One writer said to a juror, "Why didn't you convict this guy?" So I can imagine sending a white person to jail for killing an N. A little black on jury. The right to be on a jury is a powerful thing. We have the right to vote, the right to serve on juries, right to vote early, right to vote young. I went to jail July 16, 1960. July 16, 2020, I would have been on this ballot for 60 years. I'm not tired, I'm determined. Y'all quit using the old folk language that you're tired. Tiffany, you too young, you're about 17 years, you too young to be tired, Tiffany. Say, Reverend, I'm determined.
If you got called in for a call and response.
Sorry, Rev, I am determined.
Reverend Jackson, don't you want them to answer these audience questions so we don't audience suppress?
Go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna do that now, okay? So y'all, and Reverend, if we missed something, you let us know. Do y'all remember the questions?
One for all.
Okay, go ahead. Do you guys, if whoever wants to answer, let's just do it quick. Barbara said no. So basically there's a question around our agenda. LaTosha, you weighed in on this earlier. Somebody said, should we be voting blue no matter who? As a Black woman, who else should I be voting for? There was a question about what's our plan about pooling resources. That's a question I really want LaTosha to hit. Yeah, and well, one other question I have for our lawyers, shouldn't we be trying to federalize this system? Isn't the state by state, each person can have their own rules? That's the part that Tiff leaned into around vote.org. Isn't that what's confusing? Shouldn't we be using this moment of crisis to finally federalize the system?
Constitutional right to vote, right?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
As opposed to 50 separate and unequally a constitutional right to vote. We should fight for that.
Yes, we should.
Can I jump in and answer one of those audience questions?
Yes.
So there was a question I think that was posed, what more can be done? And what is the plan? And so I say that what more can be done, as LaTosha stated earlier, joining these organizations, joining the work that's already being done in your community, contributing to these organizations. We also need to rally around our economic power. The Black community has over $4 billion of economic spending annually. It is time that we rally around this and we start using our dollars within our own communities, supporting our own Black-owned businesses and showing them that our dollar matters and our voice matters, and we have to start mobilizing our dollar a little bit better in our communities. And we also need to make sure that we are putting those dollars to work. For our organization leaders, we need to make sure that when we get those dollars to our organizations, that we are reallocating that money back into our communities, back to these other nonprofits who are working, who are starting up, who need the assistance. We have to make sure that we go back to supporting within our own community, supporting our own. Every other culture does it except for our own. And that's why we keep getting infiltrated. That is why we are at war right now. We are at war. State of Black America is in a state of emergency. And it is time that we fight from every angle, whether you are political, whether you are just civic minded, whether you are a business owner or an entrepreneur, we have to fight from every angle right now.
If I could just add really quickly, I know we're pressed for time. Just to piggyback on what Jessica said, it's so important for us to make sure that we honor collaboration instead of competition. And there are a lot of organizations out here doing the work. And so many times we want to be the stars, right? We want to be at the forefront, but there's so many people that you don't have to be the leader. In the movement, there's so many people who had different roles in the movement. You could be the one who's funding the movement. You can be helping draft the emails, write those letters, and help support the organizations that are doing the work. Support the Tiffany's, the Angelas, the Kristens, the LaToshas on this call. Support the work that they're doing every single day. And a lot of us started our organizations with no funding, with money out of our own pockets, because we believed in our vision. We believed this is something we were called to do. And we don't have full-time staffs, right? And so support us financially, and also morally. Just those words of encouragement, the support that you all are giving us is so vital and it's so important. And understand or determine, there's a quote that I've seen that if you ever wonder where you would be during the civil rights era, where would you stand? This is the moment now. Where do you stand? And understand that everyone has their role, and then understand that you too can play a part and support the organizations here. Make a donation, the $5, the $10 donations that we get to Black Girls Vote. It's amazing because we know that someone made a sacrifice, little women across the country saying, we support you in the work that you're doing. So I thank the Reverend here for having us. And one last thing, and I'll close, is that what he did, he called on the businesses in our community in Chicago to support Black people and Black businesses, right? Or support Black people. And who's hiring us? Pay attention to who's supporting us during this time. Pay attention to the other communities who are supporting Black people, who are on the forefront for us and fighting for us. A lot of us have not gotten our nails done, but do we see people out there supporting us in this moment? No, we don't. So be cognizant of that, who's supporting us and where we spend our dollars, as Jessica just said. So I'll just close on that.
Thank you. Thank you. If you can, on the chat on the side, since it's being broadcast to everyone, if you can put your website so folks know how they can donate to your organization, that would be amazing. Who is next?
To all the organizations, but mine too.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. That's perfect.
And if I can quickly,
question around polling booth at Cook County Jail, a polling booth.
Yes.
7,000 voters were eligible to vote. And we raised them in the jail. You should be fined the polling booth.
Exactly.
That's a big piece of it. It seems to me that the other things you've got to take into account is that we're winning, and this double pandemic. So don't jump out of in your anger, jump from code blue, the code 19. My fear and my big fear in Minnesota, students by the thousands ignoring all the code 19 signs. And I hope there's not a spike after this week in Minnesota.
Thank you. Angela.
Yes.
I can take on a couple just really quickly, everyone. The most important thing is to vote the full ballot. There's the worst thing is that people don't know who to vote for, sometimes down ballot, school board, all the rest of those issues. If you want to know how do you find out about these people, how they voted, what they've done, are they any good or whatever, you can use a couple of resources. Vote 411. You can look up any candidate. Ballotpedia, you can look up candidates. Smart Vote, you can look up candidates. You can find out who you like and who you don't by what they've said, what they've supported, and what they've done, how they've acted versus what they're talking about. You can look that up. So I just wanted to say that, always be committed to voting full ballot, down ballot, not just the top, down ballot, all through for those DAs. Reverend just talked about the polling booths. I mean, those folks who support, why do we still have money, cash, bail, period. 500,000 people every day in our jails, right. Pre-conviction, because they can't pay money bail. We got to get rid of it. And if you don't, you got to support candidates who support that and who will eradicate it in their jurisdictions. That's what we can do. Those sheriffs decide, if there's going to be a voting booth in those jails or in those prisons, etc. Let's do this, folks. We can do this. The next thing is federalizing. Absolutely. The biggest mistake the Congress has made is not using the federal power over elections. People always talk about, well, the states get to decide the elections. They get to decide state elections. We have abdicated to the states the power to decide federal elections, but that power actually resides in Congress. 4 seats, folks, 4 seats in the Senate to turn the Senate around in the sense of having a Senate that actually responds to the needs of the people. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I'm telling you there are 4 seats that need to be turned around. And once you get a Senate and the House does what it needs to do, then you can start federalizing elections. HR 1 is a good start. It's not the best. It's not, everything I would put it there, but it's a great start. And it is about federalizing elections. So that power is there in Congress, but Congress has to operate, the House and the Senate has to vote those laws into effect. And we need universal laws that apply to all the states. And we can do that for federal elections.
Right.
And that's the answer.
Thank you so much, Barbara. So really quickly, I want to go to my 2 sisters who have not spoken yet in the Q&A to close us out. Tiff, I'm going to go to you first, and then LaTosha.
I deal with folks, thank you, Angela. I talk and deal with folks all the time who are debating me on social media and in emails about whether or not we should be voting and whether or not scare tactics work to move our people. And my answer is no. Here's how I'm asking folks to show up to the ballot box. It is not hard for us to have our own agendas. My agenda is making sure that everybody has access to clean food, clean water, that they have access to housing, that women have the right to choose what they're going to do with their own bodies, that we end student loan debt, that we keep families together and deal with our immigration system in a comprehensive way, that teachers get raises, that we make sure the universal voter registration exists so that we don't have to register every single year to vote, because that is oppressive too. I want to make sure that we're investing in schools and not prisons, and that we're ending mass incarceration, especially for our Black and brown brothers. The list goes on. I'm naming some of those things just because it is our responsibility, like Rev said, to make sure that we are educated when we are going into the ballot box to cast our ballot. You are not showing up for a candidate. You are showing up for your community. So if you keep that in mind, and that is your value set, you'll always have the choices, you'll always have the answers, and you'll always have the agency to make change in our community. Thank you so much, everybody, for having me on this.
And let me say those. I was talking to some students in Minneapolis the other day. I said, register and vote. They had to come to Gleason, look in their face. I said, would you on the jury when the killer of George come to court? So I said, hell yeah. I mean, then I said, register and vote has been nothing. We just been the jury to face the police who killed George. Everybody said, we got to figure out how to hit people they are. I want to express my thanks. I got to go to Reverend Todd to close us out. Angela, thank you so much, and the team. And Tiffany, you're too young to be tired, yeah?
Thank you, Reverend. She wasn't the only one who's tired. But before we go to Reverend Todd Geary, I would really like to.
I'm picking on Tiffany, that's all.
I know. I hear you. I see you, and I'm picking on you right back. So LaTosha, I know that I definitely want our audience to hear from you, my fiery preaching, organizing friend who told us we organize birthday parties and all kind of everything else, so we're all organizers. Take us home, sis.
I'm just going to be real quick so we can move on. I just want to give people some concrete, I can't remember all the questions and I'm not going to try to answer them, but I wanted to give people some concrete ways that they can stay engaged, particularly I'll say our work. If you're interested in, because I know there's a lot of energy and people are wanting to know what they can do. So like I said, find a political home. One of the spaces that I'll make an invitation, open invitation, is Black Voters Matter. And so if you're interested in being connected to our work, text We Matter to 797979. That's We Matter, WEMATTER, to 797979. If you are a Black grassroots group, they're on the front lines right now and doing work in communities, particularly in the 11 states we're working in. But we're also, if you're a Black grassroots group, reach out to us. We also have funds set aside to provide some capacity building support, particularly those that are doing mutual aid relief right now. If you go to our website, blackvotersmatterfund.org, and you can apply for a grant. It's really simple, or reach out to us, and then there's some resources. Third thing is every Tuesday and Thursday, starting this Thursday, we've got one in South Carolina. We're having town hall meetings where we have groups and organizations that are front lines on the ground doing work, because there are a lot of organizations doing work. You can go to our you come to our Facebook page live at 7 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday. The fourth thing is you can also, we're doing trainings. So if you're interested in how to become an organizer, how to organize in your community, starting this month, Black Voters Matter will be doing trainings. We'll announce that on all our social media platforms, including on Facebook. And the last thing, y'all, is spread some love and joy. Our people need some joy right now and some love around our killing. Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on, hold on, my people, hold on.
We love you. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. We are so, so grateful that you spent your Saturday morning with us. Thank you to Rainbow Push Coalition for yielding this platform to some very, very powerful women who I'm proud to call sisters in the struggle. Can you all promise to continue to engage in struggle with us? LaTosha said we are organizers, so we have nothing to lose. Let's go, y'all.